So thanks for the entrance and thanks for having us as well. So this whole journey started when we were in Africa, like in Kenya with Steffi together. And during that time, she was the only one in this whole audience asking the right questions. She was always asking, what can we learn from you? And we want to highlight this today a little bit. And I think Steffi fully understood the potential that is in Africa. And maybe we can dig a little bit deeper with this panel here. And I had this honor and I had this privilege to talk to them a little bit earlier. And I saw the dynamic of the group, and it was great. And I want you to all to listen, stop all the conversations at the back, because these people here are writing history right now in Africa. And I had yesterday, there was a panel session, and they were talking about what is missing in Germany, especially in Europe. And they were talking about, oh, we need autonomous driving. And I will hook to you, Caitlin, because you raised €1 billion in fundings this year, or last year. And why did you get it? And that's the common sense behind it. Why I'm asking the question is because I heard it yesterday and thought like, no. In Africa, this is already happening.
It's already happening. Thank you. So a little bit about Zipline. We are a robotics company. Today, we are the largest autonomous logistics system on Earth. We got our start in Africa. And so, I think the best way to understand Zipline is it seemed obvious to us that somebody was going to invent an autonomous logistics system for the planet. Logistics don't work very well for most people. I think supply chain inefficiencies cost the world economy about $1 trillion a year. And the way we do things is frankly really inefficient and slow and expensive. And so if we can make it 10 times faster, 10 times cheaper, far more efficient and zero emissions, that's a worthy thing to pursue. And so that's what Zipline set out to build. We have built. We did it in Africa. And so we all know that constraint really drives innovation. The interesting thing about Africa is, the logistics constraint there, it's not just really costing the economy, it's costing lives too. And so being able to solve a problem of that magnitude really starts to, you tackle that problem with a lot more urgency and entrepreneurial drive. And so that's why we started there. Our first customers were Rwanda.
Wow, yep. Wow. Do you have some numbers for us? How many trips are possible by those drones, to be honest, and deliveries?
Yeah, so each of our drones each of our drone ports delivers about 1 to 2 metric freights a day across these countries. A country like Rwanda is making about 500 deliveries a day around the country. We have flown 120 million autonomous miles with 0 safety incidents and made about 2 million deliveries now. So wow. It's pretty scaled.
Wow.
Yep.
And you said earlier when we were talking together, you said if it wouldn't be for Africa, we wouldn't be here today.
Exactly.
Why did you say that?
Yeah, so when we had this idea to build a logistics system for the planet, just imagine what it would be like if you had a fully autonomous logistics system outside operating today in the real world. It's kind of hard to imagine. And when we were looking for a place to try to develop this technology, like I was saying before, the constraint in Africa is maybe the most acute, and therefore you have the greatest motivation to solve this. We entered the market. We went to Rwanda in partnership with the government, and they asked us they gave us the hardest problem they could think of, which was to deliver blood to hospitals when, women are experiencing postpartum hemorrhage after birth, or when a kid has severe malaria and they're gonna, die if they don't get a blood transfusion. And so, very high stakes problem to solve. So they gave us a couple hospitals to work with, and once the technology started going, I think the really impressive thing is that the regulators partnered with us to create the right kind of controls we could embed into airspace safely. The ministries of health, the cabinet, they all kind of, worked really hard to experiment with different use cases on the platform. It was just kind of a whole of government approach to adopting this innovation. And when it started to really bear fruit, when it started to prove it had a big impact on health outcomes for patients, the government didn't think twice about actually transitioning to having a nationwide autonomous logistics system using drones. And that's what we have today. Rwanda is a world leader. Africa is the world leader in developing and adopting scaled autonomous logistics, and Rwanda is really the birthplace of that.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah.
The German chancellor, he was recently in South Africa, and he was stating like, "Oh, Africa is the future. We need to invest there." Do you believe that Africa is the future of innovation?
I mean, I think constraint drives innovation everywhere, and so I think we're going to see it everywhere. But I think Africa is a pretty untapped market. I think that we were talking before about how the countries that have the most access to technology, they kind of appreciated the least.
Yeah.
I think when countries in Africa are really interested in tech companies showing up and using innovative technology to solve problems. And I think that people there, we were also talking about this, talent, genius is like evenly distributed, although opportunity is not. And we need a better nexus of genius and opportunity and funding.
Yeah.
But I think that Africa is the place where we're going to see a lot of invention.
Yeah.
Yep.
You were talking about constraints, and constraints, if I hear the word, I'm always thinking about Karim, because Karim, under the biggest constraints, you founded InstaDeep with 2 laptops, $2,000 and a vision. Why Africa?
So, I mean, well, first I grew up in Africa, in the Tunisian desert, near to actually Tatooine, where Star Wars was shot. And after studies in France and the US, I felt a strong urge to do something really interesting and challenging, but also go against the common thinking. And at the time, the thinking was, oh, Africa for tech and software, it's a place to do just have work done in a cheaper way, but not necessarily do innovation or deep tech innovation. And I felt people were sort of wrong about this. And I just decided to follow my passion and co-found InstaDeep with Zora Slim in Tunisia, really to prove that we could do something. But more than anything, I just followed my heart. It's not like we had an amazing business plan or we were anticipating what would happen. It was there's something that is being misunderstood by the world. And I wanted to see by myself, if we could do something about that, and if we could innovate like DeepMind. This was the time in 2014 when DeepMind had just been acquired by Google, very inspiring story, deep learning, etc. And I was like, what about we do this in Africa? What about we do things at the same level as the best in the world? And everybody thought, this was wishful thinking, but we decided just to try, and it turned out that we could, yeah.
Nice, wow. And InstaDeep got acquired by BioNTech 3 years ago, 3 years now. And what did BioNTech see in InstaDeep? Because they saw the knowledge, they saw this huge potential, and everybody here, we benefit from this invention that you got with InstaDeep and BioNTech together, when we think about COVID especially. And what is going to happen in AI? What are you seeing in the future?
Yeah, it's been really it's unbelievable how much the industry changed. But for me, on top of testing this hypothesis on African deep tech innovation in Africa with an Africa-based team, there was this notion of if we do innovation on one side, genuine innovation, we published more than 120 research papers last year, 6 Nature journals papers. That's a record for an AI startup from Africa by far. But also make sure this is useful in practice. So this mix of let's deliver value to our partners and let's have fun and innovate at the same time, a bit like what Lion on the previous panel was talking about, this notion of this is research, you could explore stuff. And we did that, but we also had a passion for getting things done and delivering value. And so with BioNTech and other partners, also like Google and others, we really were focused on delivering value. And so we started working with our colleagues at BioNTech in 2019, and through the years, delivered value on many, many projects. So, by the time we decided jointly to become one team, they knew us very well, and we had already delivered lots of value across multiple spaces. And what's interesting is there's still so much to do. We are still in the early days of the AI revolution, and I think the opportunity is absolutely insane. If I were to restart InstaDeep today, I think we could have an insane productivity and like do incredible things, even with a very small team. So like what's possible today is absolutely unprecedented. And it's amazing news for Africa when you see like open source models. You know, there's some people speaking about DeepSeek, for example. Yeah. That's an incredible good news for Africa. This means that, you know, people in China or in the US spent hundreds of millions, sometimes maybe billions of dollars deploying and training a large language model. You can get it for free of rights, and then adapt it to specific problems, whether in Africa and for the world. And that is unprecedented. I wish I had that when we started InstaDeep, but just to say, things are evolving in a way where a small but very motivated team, no matter where they are in the world, as long as they have an internet connection, could do wonders.
Yeah, thanks, wow. And you wrote a book recently and you published it, and in this book you teach some of these ideas that we have for the continent, for the world. What are these ideas? Can you share them with us? Maybe we have some investors who think like, hey, this is one idea I would like to invest.
Sure, yeah, this was my holiday time, you know, end of year holidays last year. I felt strongly people, again, were still underestimating the potential and sort of like, what's the strategy to have like sustainable development in Africa in the age of AI? And I decided to actually go public with the ideas, because for me this is bigger than, you know, just one team. And I think actually there are multiple unicorn ideas in the book. And the key ones is we are at an exceptional time, because we spoke about the AI revolution, and what has happened recently. Well, what's the critical threshold? The critical threshold is we have essentially reached AGI. What does it mean in practice? And let's not be afraid of like big terms. My definition of AGI, and I said this last year, and I think we reached that definition or that performance threshold in December 2025, is if you have an AI that can do as well as the top 30% humans doing a particular cognitive task professionally on 85 to 90% of the cognitive like job markets in the world weighted by GDP, that's essentially AGI. We are there today. So that threshold means things are going to accelerate massively. You could do so much more. Yeah. The second threshold, more, and interestingly, is about renewable energy. Now solar in Africa, and not just solar, but also geothermal and wind power, but let's just focus on solar, is actually cheaper than oil and gas. So this is extremely big, and this is an extraordinary chance for Africa, because it's by far the continent that has the biggest renewable energy resources. And the third revolution is in finance. We have now decentralized money. It's still early days, but in many ways, a digital currency like Bitcoin in particular looks and feels really like digital gold. And done right, and some small countries like Bhutan and others have done this right, this is an extraordinary opportunity for Africans and African governments. So again here, critical points reached. We have 400 people using Bitcoin. It's the same as where the internet was in 1999. And if you remember that time, yeah, it was obvious that internet was there to stay. You passed the critical threshold. This is where we are. Most people don't know that we get there, but for people who are actually looking at facts, those are the facts. So combine these three together, and you have a mix, a very potent mix of opportunities that for Africa means you can actually grow the continent much faster in terms of GDP, in terms of human capital, than anything that was possible today, without any public money. Because let's be realistic, it's not with public money that we will build Africa. It's with private investments and human capital. I've seen extraordinary talents in, all across the countries where we are. We're in South Africa, we're in Rwanda, and we're in Tunisia. And so it's actually possible to grow the continent with $0 of public money if we are smart and we leverage those trends.
You talked about talents, and talents is a good keyword, because when we talk about talents, so your recent project, Tatooine, is called like the city where you grew up. And what is the idea behind it? Why are you giving back now to the community?
So first we called it Project Tatooine because, Tatooine is where Luke Skywalker grew up, and, he's a Jedi, so he can use the Force. And I'll tell you something important. Actually, I believe the Force is AI. AI can drive the galaxy towards a very good outcome or a very bad one, but it's definitely the Force. And so with Project Tatooine, the idea is to allow many people who cannot afford it to have a digital education and get familiar with AI agentic workflows. And again, the idea here is not, hey, let's train people to become coders or developers and push code themselves. The idea is to train them on how to use AI efficiently to do the coding. And this is essential because today you can actually build an entire iOS app with payment systems, get it accepted on the Apple Store for actually in less than 48 hours. Yeah. And so if you give that knowledge to people, magic will happen. And it doesn't need, again, to be a very big team. It could be a very small team, like, 2 youngsters, like super motivated, internet connection, and they can be in business, part of the global economy. And that's my dream, and so that's what we're trying with Project Tatooine.
Wow, thank you. And Joba, because you are doing a similar thing, because not a similar thing, but a completely different thing. You are the co-founder of The Nest. Can you explain a little bit what The Nest is?
Thank you. So, taking from what both of you have actually done, investment and opportunity coming to Africa. But what we've seen is the startups and the founders need to be prepared. So at The Nest, what we had missing when we started business was pretty much around structure, around mentorship, around access to infrastructure to build what we really wanted to do. Yep. So in 2018, we felt it was quite important to start designing these programs specifically for entrepreneurs and also focusing on sectors. So within the health space, we run, for instance, like the Center for Digital Health and Innovation, where we run these kind of programs around health, then get mentors that can speak to the founders. Because to be honest, it's not just about money. Founders definitely have good ideas, but beyond ideas, they want to tap into resources of knowledge of what you've gained over like the past 10 years, and also institutional data. And we're seeing a spike in organizational backing. We are part of the Africa Meets Bavaria program, for instance, where we're relying on entrepreneurship infrastructure and also founders within that space. So for us, we think Africa is at a very, very ripe age where it's not just that place you think about where something eventually will happen, but we also understand that as the opportunities are there, we need to really tap into organized, established systems that you already have in Europe, for instance. So Africa is not just staying in silo. And Africa is not just, we shouldn't look at it as just one continent. It's 54 different markets. And understanding that in designing products, in solving problems, you will know that you need to enter each country as a founder, speak to the people, understand their pain points, then use that to design what will really work for them. Yeah, so at The Nest, pretty much that's what we're doing. We found it exciting, and we really hope a lot of people will take this approach in solving problems.
Nice. You talked about the Unternehmertum. Unternehmertum is like close to here, and you are partnering with them. Is there one thing where you can say like, hey, they can learn something from us?
So I think we both can learn from ourselves. In November, a group of entrepreneurs came from Germany to Nigeria to really study why and how fast things are actually done. And I think that in itself is a strength, to be honest, because we look at it from a point of view, you are your own government. So a lot of innovations, a lot of problem solving, a lot of building ideas. People are quite agile in doing that. They do it fast because, to be honest, they're not expecting solution or help from any government in itself. So for program like with Unternehmertum, it's also quite important for us that as much as we're doing things fast, we also need to lean in organizations that already have processes, playbooks around what has helped them to really grow the ecosystem. It's like the best startup ecosystem in Europe. And that partnership really means a lot to us because it means that we don't need to start from the scratch in Africa. We can just take the playbook, how they're doing it, and just replicate the same models, across board. So I feel more things like this need to be done. And Africa is like the place to be honest. I feel a lot of spending, a lot of investments are already gone into it. GIZ, for instance, in a number of the countries. And to be honest, Germany is like one of the few countries that's really taken interest in Africa in a very long time. I've been to Mauritania, I saw GIZ there, Zambia, GIZ, in a number of these countries. And if investors or businesses are not coming to tap into those opportunities, then it's just like wasted funds. China is in Africa heavily, and it means that there's something they're seeing. So at the same time, investors from Europe, businesses from Europe, can actually outsource some of the problems to Africa to help solve, and while doing that, they can learn. Earlier, Kathleen, you were talking about how the drone system, how development is done in Nigeria. And interestingly, two things are going to happen when you put those kind of programs in play. The talents in Nigeria, they are learning, but at the same time, you are organically developing businesses that can stand on their own.
Wow, thank you. Great. And I'm asking myself, because maybe I'm asking you, and what do you think, because there's so many risks in Africa. We always hear this, there's so much risk in Africa. Why should I invest there? Why should I put my money there? But if I'm looking around the world, everywhere else is the risk. So we see wars wherever we look, and everything else is changing so fast. And Africa seems to be, to me, a stable market. So what are the people not understanding, or the investors? What is the misunderstanding of the risk there?
So, okay, Africa is at a point where there are a number of things that we can lean in. Yes, the risks are there, but it's also one of the places where, because it's like a blank canvas, a market where there's not so much bureaucracy around what should happen, because a number of also the founders, it's not like they've gone somewhere to really see how difficult it is to build these businesses. The barriers are low. It's also an opportunity to really build on those kind of things. You can easily call a minister, you can get into office, you can get permits as much as possible, because it's like a canvas. Now you can really build a lot of things when you have structures that you can actually reference. I also think there are some opportunities within that space. Time difference with Europe. We're just like 1 hour the same time zone. I think something that we can rely on. And lastly, and more importantly, it's talent. We have a very young population that is agile, that learn a lot of things on their own. And in that, it's a huge opportunity. The risks are there, but I also feel that the opportunities are quite more than the risks.
Well, and actually, to add to what you were saying, if you look at where Europe is, Europe needs competitive access to energy, but also compute power. And in a context where there is this arms race in terms of compute and energy between China and the US, today US has 10 times more compute than China, but China has 10 times more energy than the US, especially in solar and the like. Africa, actually, and in particular North Africa, is an opportunity for Europe because it's so close. You have telecoms, cables, you can be in 5 milliseconds in Southern Europe, like Rome, Marseille, Barcelona, and so on. And that means that for Europe, this is an extraordinary opportunity to develop large assets in partnerships with African countries and make it a genuine win-win. Again, the idea here is not just go there and tap energy. Go there and build the infrastructure of the future, the cities of geniuses, if you take Dario Amodei's word, the CEO of Anthropic, and it would have value for Africa and it would have value for Europe. So there are win-wins like this that today are not being taken advantage of and yet are obvious. And when you think about stability in terms of whether it's energy supply or token supply, that's something that's an untapped opportunity for both Africa and Europe. And so hopefully we have many more bold visions that become reality. And based on what I have seen in the past, we gotta be bold because, really if you try it and it's from a first principles approach, makes sense, it will happen. It's just a matter of willpower. It's like you said, there's so much to be done, but this one is an obvious one. And one of the reasons why I wrote the book was to be open about this because I do not see these big investments. The real opportunity in infrastructure of compute, renewable energy, been talk and talk and talk, yet it hasn't happened. And collectively, that's the kind of things we should focus on.
Thank you. Caitlin.
Yeah, I think you started this panel asking, what can we learn from Africa? Yeah. That's the key question. And, in our sector, we set out to build an autonomous logistics system for Earth. one that can serve all humans equally. And we were able to invent that in Africa, and all these kind of fast followers or slow followers or laggards, like regulators in America and Europe, they're now learning from Africa. They're catching up to that, and the technology is now really starting to take off in other parts of the world. And I think if we look hard, we're going to find a lot of different places where that's the case. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, I think the knowledge exchange, I think the behavior of governments to be extremely entrepreneurial, they take the vision, they take the entrepreneurial drive, they act with urgency, and and I think that Europe and America need to learn from that too. So.
Wow.
And if you take actually, to your point, Kathleen, like if you take like essentially the robotics platform you guys have built, and if you add the insane capabilities of digital AI, you could have basically universal access to advanced healthcare in Africa. Yeah. Someone just with a smartphone, even without the internet, could have medical advice better than 90% of doctors worldwide, and with sort of like a drone delivery of goods, etc., access to life-saving drugs, not just the medical advice, but the drugs themselves. And hey, maybe this is going to happen first in Africa. Yeah. And so really, like the message here is, we should really think from first principles. And the only limit is knowledge. And yet knowledge is progressing the fastest it ever has in human history. And with AI, you can see AI as a sort of turbocharging knowledge accumulation. So we gotta be bold, but that would be fun that it's the first time in the world that it happens in Africa.
I'm certain it will.
Yeah.
Yes.
So before we close the panel, I know we are overdue, I'm sorry for that, but this is so important. Like, what is the one thing, like to each of you, like what is the one thing where Africa is leapfrogging already the future?
We debated this earlier. In my opinion, it's infrastructure. You know what I mean? Like the cars that we use to transport anything anywhere is 100 years old. In banking and fintech, we were able to really leapfrog all of that infrastructure. In energy access, we went straight to solar, and didn't build out those big expensive grids. And now I think in logistics being such a chokehold on every economy in Africa and in some cases around the world, this place it's very ripe for adopting technology that just kind of leapfrogs over it. And so I think, in my opinion, if we can solve this big foundational problem that touches every part of the economies, we're going to see all these other technologies applied on top of it, like accelerate progress even more.
Another opportunity also is in two other sectors where we're going to see, I think, amazing things, is education and healthcare. And the amazing thing, like what I was mentioning about medical advice with AI, which is now proven. I mean, there have been multiple studies on that. This is starting to become a reality. For example, like in Senegal, there are multiple startups delivering the future already in the country, and it's not just Senegal, there are many other countries. And this is really like, it's going to be profound. My dad was actually a doctor, and he dedicated his entire career to curing people, and he was like in the most remote city in Tunisia, and sometimes you couldn't get access to a specialist. Now the specialist will be literally in your smartphone. That's insane, and it will have impact. Same thing on education. There are ed techs in Africa now, doing wonderful things with personalized sort of like courses, with like also personalized help for teachers about what to do with their next class, or help grading. This is a reality, and right now like there are like hundreds of thousands of student submissions that are being graded by AI, and in many ways this is ahead of what's happening in other places of the world. So hopefully we continue on that track.
Joba, shortly.
It's the future workforce. And to be honest, we need to actually treat it that way, which is sitting on education and also infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So before we clap, I have this one little Steffi moment in my life as well. Get in contact with these people. If you're investing, talk with them. If you want to see the future of Africa, talk with them, because they are the people who are making the future right now in Africa. And this is the applause now for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.